Welcome back. It's 5 minutes. In the next hour, we're going to be talking about so-called smart motorways, which I always think have been incorrectly named because there doesn't seem to be anything smart or indeed sensible about them. I was thinking about this as I was driving down the M1 today to come to the studio to present this show. And it just strikes me as absolutely idiotic to think that it is safer to remove the hard shoulder on a motorway and make it all lanes running. So that's also another name for these smart motorways, ALR, all lane running motorways. Because at the end of the day, if you're caught in the hard shoulder because you've broken down, you've got some issue with your vehicle, then that's the point where you're trying to find salvation. And with the stream of traffic and the speeds with which people drive past, it doesn't take a genius to work out the potential pitfalls. And there's been an extraordinary investigation today by one of my Telegraph colleagues, Steve Bird, who we're going to speak to in just a moment, to discover exactly what he has found out about smart motorways. And can I just warn you, it's literally going to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, because he's spoken to a number of whistleblowers within the system who are raising serious concerns about the safety of smart motorways. So it doesn't take a genius to work this out, and yet still the government seems to be persisting with the transformation of our motorway networks. Now, it's interesting, hasn't it? Because I think Grant Shapps has been on LBC on a number of occasions justifying smart motorways and insisting in some cases they're not just as safe as conventional motorways, but apparently even safer. Let's listen to a clip with him discussing the veritable merits of these motorways.
There's a report that will be on my desk this Friday describing where that stock takes up to, and I will be working to push, cajole, etc. Highways England, who are responsible for this network, to go further and faster in the measures that have been taken. One thing which is very interesting is I've been looking at the fatalities, as you rightly say, 39 on smart motorways between 2015 and 2019, and looking at the fatalities on non-smart motorways, 368 during the same period. What we need to do, in my view, is not just have smart motorways which are, as the report said last year, as safe in most but not always, it said. I want them to be the safest roads in the world, the safest places to be driving.
That was Transport Secretary Grant Shapps speaking to Nick Ferrari back in April about the potential pitfalls of smart motorways. Interestingly, around that time, he issued a review into smart motorways after an MP, it was Hugh Merriman, who is the chairman of the Transport Select Committee, said there were genuine worries about the number of people who had been killed on them. Now, we heard him cite those statistics there, that 39 people had been killed on smart motorways compared to more than 300 on a normal motorway. But there is a number of different bodies, and we'll speak to somebody who has been directly affected by this in a moment, who have raised serious concerns about the operation of these motorways and particularly their digitisation. Because obviously if you have a situation where you have a major malfunction in the so-called cybersphere, then that can lead to real complications when it comes to the signage of these motorways and to the authorities being alerted if somebody has broken down in the slow lane. And it's at this point I want to bring in my colleague Steve Bird, who is a Telegraph journalist. He's done this astonishing piece for the Sunday Telegraph today, in which I think he's used a number of FOI requests to try and determine what the feeling is inside the system about smart motorways. Let's bring Steve in now so you can explain to us, Steve, look, what is it that you've actually discovered? Because it does make the eyes water.
Well, what happened was I was approached, or at least contact was made with me with somebody who works within Highways England. And they cited a number of instances in April, exactly when you played that clip from Grant Shapps there, when he was making that announcement, where they basically sort of said, we've had a few problems within 2 control rooms. And initially I thought, well, how accurate is this? Put a call into the Highways England. And they very naturally said, well, you're going to have to do a freedom of information request. So I worked out the best way to do this, and I fired off the request, and it came back, and I was staggered. Everything this person had said was spot on. They had nailed it entirely, which was that over 4 days, the system across the whole of the northeastern Yorkshire and the southwest, so that's the M1, M62, M4 and M5 from memory, basically they couldn't control the signs. Now, that means that if you did break down in a live lane, they couldn't say to other drivers, avoid that lane, which is debilitating. It was about 8 hours it lasted in total. But that's just a sample few days that I've looked at. So you wonder how widespread it is.
That is absolutely horrifying. And didn't you discover one of the whistleblowers revealed that the DINAC system, and that's the system which controls all of the signage and is the kind of, I guess, digital backdrop to this, was actually nicknamed Die Now, the Die Now system, because presumably people who work with it and are familiar with it feel that it's not fit for purpose.
Well, it's interesting because the problem isn't necessarily with DINAC. It's the wider, far wider complex system that runs the entire network. So if you think at home, you might have a computer, an iPad, a phone connected to your internet. But if you times that so tremendously for what runs what is equivalent really to their air traffic control for roads, it's reliant upon servers, firewalls, and usually the problem is found elsewhere, not with DINAC, but for the person who's the controller. They naturally blame that piece of software, so they nicknamed it DINAC instead of Die Now. But technically, that's fine. The problems, I think it was a bug in a firewall and a telecommunications system that contacted all of the devices that you see on smart motorways, 30,000 in total. So that's where the problem lay. But it's proof of their sense of sheer exasperation, at least some of them who are encountering this, that they may well not be able to help someone. And these people obviously are doing a pretty stressful job, and want to do it well.
Finally, Steve, look, you're more familiar with this than I am. I'm just speaking from a motorist, and I just think the notion of turning a hard shoulder into a lane defies common sense. What's your gut on this? You've looked at a lot of the data. You've got Grant Shapps there. On one hand, he's carrying out a review into the safety of the motorways, while at the same time saying that they could be safer than conventional motorways. What's your view, just looking at the anecdotal and indeed some of the data that you've drilled into?
Well, bizarrely, when I first looked at this 2 years ago, when I was asked to look at it by one of my editors, and I had no idea what a smart motorway was. I thought it was something in the future. So I think that the issue is that you're only as smart as your technology. And the smart bit of smart motorways, certainly in that period in April, was not proven to be that smart. So it was unreliable. I think the important thing is people shouldn't start driving on A roads to avoid motorways, smart motorways. They're still safer. But I still question some elements of the statistics. I feel as though when you actually drill into it, that there's a little bit of making the numbers work for what you want. But it's a very complicated area, trying to establish per million miles, how many people are injured and so on.
Yeah.
But I'm very aware every time I get onto a smart motorway, and I've spoken to police as well who say that they're very aware that you've got to concentrate because you're getting a lot of information which may make you drive slightly safer, but it's that what happens when the human element comes in, and can technology step in every time that we need it in every instance. I'm very aware of cases where exactly that hasn't happened.
Right. Thank you so much, Steve. Steve Bird is a journalist for The Telegraph. He wrote the story in the investigation into smart motorways, which is in today's Sunday Telegraph. We'll get your calls coming in on this in a moment. 0345 6060 973. Are you worried about smart motorways? Do you think that they are, in fact, dangerous and not smart at all? We're also going to be speaking shortly to somebody who's been directly affected by this. In the meantime, I just, in the interest of balance, want to read out the statement from Highways England in response to the Telegraph story today. It's changed its name to National Highways as part of a £7 million rebranding project. But a spokesperson there said that there wasn't a fault with the DINAC system itself, or it failed to work out due to problems with other connected systems or servers. The spokesperson insisted that well-rehearsed contingency plans were successfully implemented to ensure the safety of all road users. They also said that the government-owned company recognised the pressures all employees are under performing vital tasks, which is why a support system and a range of 24/7 employee assistance options are available to them. She also said England's motorways are among the safest in the world, designed to be so even without the use of technology, while our traffic management systems provide an extra layer of support for road users, using a range of measures including CCTV and variable speed limits to keep traffic flowing safely. So that's the response from Highways England, now called National Highways. Do you agree with them? You can text on 84850, tweet at LBC. Are you worried about the safety of these smart motorways? Perhaps you're concerned in general about the state of Britain's roads. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel they've really deteriorated in COVID times, probably because there haven't been the ability to get staff out to repair the roads. But around my way, and I live in a fairly countrified area, they're just beset with potholes and an absolute nightmare. So you've got this combination of different issues. And I suppose there's also a problem, isn't there, with the Transport Secretary being so fixated on the situation at airports and with airliners and all the rest of it that perhaps roads have been a secondary concern. Let's bring in Niaz Ahmed now, who's a campaigner against smart motorways. And Niaz, I know this is because this has affected you very personally. Thank you for joining us. Tell us what happened to your mother.
Thanks for having me. Yes, so 3 years to the day it will be actually. Next month, we lost my mother on one of these smart motorways due to a number of the failings that you've just discussed in the last 5 minutes or so. Circumstances that I believe could have been avoided if there were safety precautions, and certain elements weren't implemented as they have been. But, we are where we are. We lost my mother. And we're a lot poorer for it as a family.
Of course you are. I'm really sorry to hear that. And what are you campaigning for? Would you rather that these motorways were scrapped completely?
Look, I've had conversations on this before, and there's elements of smart motorways that can work. I'm not, completely saying they need to be scrapped and completely rolled up and put in the waste can. However, in the current implementation of them, they are not fit for purpose. They're not safe. They're not basically allowing us to use them in the safest manner. The corporate lingo, the jargon, whatever you want to call it, that you've just kind of read out from Highways England doesn't help that, because everyone, whether it's internal, as you've just said, as part of Steve's tremendous work that he's put through today in his piece, whether it's external from the users who are actually on those roads, can see, and you've mentioned this yourself, Camilla, around it just being completely idiotic, thinking a fourth lane can just replace the hard shoulder and everything would be as safe or safe as, to quote their very line. It's completely idiotic. It can't be. That's the whole reason for it. What I want in an ideal world is elements of them, fine, we can continue with them as they are, but the hard shoulder needs to be reinstated. That needs to be the bare minimum there to support any technological kind of implementations that they want, whether it's SVD, whether it's additional points, ERAs by the side of the road. They need to be implemented per their trials as well. However, they can't just be willy-nilly put in 2.5 miles down the stretch of road when their trials were putting them in every 600 meters or so. There's just a lot of conflicts in terms of the implementations that they've gone in. So look, there are good bits to them, but they need to go hand in hand with the hard shoulder in there reinstated.
Okay, thank you very much. That's Niaz Ahmed. He's a campaigner against smart motorways because his mother was killed 3 years ago on a smart motorway. I mean, it seems to me to defy common sense to take out a hard shoulder. Just why would you